The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat at the modest human delegation table, her hands folded calmly as 12 different species argued around her in a cacophony of clicks, roars, and subsonic rumbles. The Zephyrian representative's crystalline form flickered with agitation, while the Corvan war chief's mandibles clacked menacingly at the sleek Nexari envoy. At the head of the chamber, High Chancellor Vexitar of the Hegemony watched with cold satisfaction as chaos consumed the proceedings. For 3 cycles, the galaxy's greatest powers had gathered to address what they called the human problem. In less than 2 centuries since first contact, humanity had somehow inserted itself into every major trade route, conflict, and alliance. Not through conquest. Humans were laughably weak compared to most species, but through something far more unsettling. They talked. "The humans have violated the Proxima Accords," screeched Ambassador Crix, her feathers bristling. "They've established settlements in neutral space, with proper documentation filed through 17 different regulatory bodies," Elena said quietly, not looking up from her tablet. Her voice carried easily through the chamber despite its softness, all legal according to subsection 4.7 of the Colonial Administration Code. The Crixian fell silent, her beak snapping shut with audible frustration. High Chancellor Vextar leaned forward, his 6 eyes focusing on the human. "Ambassador Vasquez, your species continues to complicate galactic affairs. Perhaps it's time we discussed limitations on human expansion." Elena finally looked up, meeting his gaze with steady brown eyes. "Chancellor, I appreciate your concern. But before we discuss limitations, shouldn't we address the Hegemony's current blockade of the Cygnus shipping lanes?" A ripple of tension swept the chamber. The blockade was supposed to be classified. "That is a matter of galactic security," Vextar replied carefully. "Of course," Elena nodded. "I'm sure the families of the 43 missing freighter crews will understand. Though I wonder if the Trade Federation knows their medical supplies have been delayed for security reasons." The Nexari delegates' scales shifted to a pale green, their species equivalent of shock. "Medical supplies? Chancellor, you assured us those lanes were clear of civilian traffic." Elena continued in the same gentle tone. "The manifest logs are public record, of course, filed through the appropriate channels. Strange how often important information gets lost in bureaucracy, isn't it?" Chancellor Vextar's jaw tightened. Somehow this soft-spoken human had just exposed his illegal blockade and turned 3 allies against him with nothing but publicly available information and the right questions. "You speak of bureaucracy," growled General Thok of the Corvan Empire, his scarred hide gleaming under the chamber lights. "Yet your people ignore proper military protocols. Human ships enter our space without proper escort formations." "Ah, yes," Elena smiled slightly. "The escort requirement, enacted under Emergency Statute 7, I believe, though that was passed during the Zephyrian border crisis, which was resolved 18 months ago." She glanced at her tablet. Strange that an emergency statute remains in effect after the emergency has ended. Almost as if someone wanted to control civilian traffic for other purposes. General Thok's massive fists clenched. The Corvan Empire had been using the outdated statute to shake down merchant vessels for protection fees. The Zephyrian representative's form shifted to a deep blue, curiosity mixed with amusement. "Ambassador Vasquez raises an interesting point. General Thok, perhaps you could explain why Corvan escorts require such substantial compensation from civilian vessels?" Elena said nothing, simply watching as the 3 most powerful military forces in the galaxy began turning on each other. She hadn't made a single accusation, hadn't raised her voice once. She'd simply asked questions and stated facts. "Enough!" Chancellor Vextar slammed his primary fist on the podium. "This is exactly why human presence destabilizes galactic order. You sow discord with your transparency?" Elena suggested helpfully. "Your manipulation." Elena tilted her head slightly. "Chancellor, I'm curious. When did asking questions become manipulation? When did filing proper paperwork become destabilization?" Her voice remained calm, almost conversational. "Because if following galactic law is disruptive, perhaps we should examine who benefits from that disruption." The chamber erupted. Species that had been allies for centuries suddenly found themselves questioning each other's motives. Trade agreements were being scrutinized. Military pacts were under review. And at the center of it all sat a small human woman, who had done nothing but tell the truth. High Chancellor Vextar watched his carefully constructed web of influence unravel with each soft-spoken word from the human diplomat. For generations, the hegemony had maintained power through complexity, laws so intricate, procedures so Byzantine, that only they could navigate the system. They had convinced the galaxy that order required their guidance, their interpretation of regulations, their arbitration of disputes. But humans didn't just learn the system. They memorized it, cross-referenced it, and then politely pointed out its contradictions. "You think you're clever," Vextar hissed. "But humans are weak. Your ships are fragile, your soldiers few. What happens when we simply ignore your laws and paperwork?" Helena was quiet for a long moment, her fingers steepled. When she spoke, her voice was softer than ever, yet somehow it seemed to fill the vast chamber. "Chancellor, that's an interesting question. You're right. Humanity doesn't have the largest fleet or the strongest military, but we do have something else." She paused, looking around the chamber at the dozens of species representatives. "We have friends. The Nexari medical research programs use human-developed algorithms. The Zephyrian crystal farms rely on human agricultural techniques. The Corvin Military Academy teaches human tactical theory. Even your own hegemony uses human-designed translation protocols." Her smile was gentle, almost maternal. "We didn't conquer anyone, Chancellor. We helped them, and now they're all asking themselves, why would the hegemony want to silence the people who made their lives better?" The silence stretched on. Elena stood slowly, gathering her tablet and documents. "The vote on human expansion rights is scheduled for tomorrow. I trust everyone will consider carefully what kind of galaxy they want to live in. One built on cooperation and transparency, or one ruled by fear and secrecy." She walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing softly in the stunned chamber. As she reached the door, she turned back. "Oh, and Chancellor? The missing freighter crews were rescued this morning by a joint human-Nexari task force. They're all safe. I thought you'd want to know." The doors closed behind her with a gentle whisper. In the chamber, High Chancellor Vextar stared at the empty human delegation table. Around him, centuries-old alliances crumbled as species demanded answers, transparency, accountability. The hegemony's empire of shadows was dissolving in the light of simple questions and uncomfortable truths. The human diplomat who spoke softly had indeed made empires tremble, not with fear of her strength, but with the terrifying prospect of their own exposure. The vote the next day wasn't even close.